Good evening, folks. Welcome to tonight's episode of Murder Hobo, the Socium edition. This is our Iron DM version at world building. So it should be pretty interesting. Tonight, we're discussing historical, political figures for the world building that we have. Those that have not followed us, basically, Socium is a project where we have team of dungeon masters, world builders that are getting together every other week, so 2 weeks out of the month, to have the show and discussion about these world building exercises that we're having to these zones that we have a map of. At the end of the year, all our world building is going to be compiled into one big printed or whatever. I'm not quite sure what Frank has in mind exactly for it, but it's going to be one big world, and yeah, it's going to be great. I mean, these guys have been killing it and knock it out of the park. So without any further ado, let me thank our sponsors tonight, Oddfish Games. They have Adventure Sense. It is like 30 different, I believe, scents that they have available to kind of, give that sense of, I don't know, aroma or atmosphere to your game. So, if you're playing with a, bunch of basement dwelling gamers and stuff like that, yeah, sometimes you might want to have a little adventure sense going.
When deodorant's not enough. Is that what you're trying to say?
Exactly. Because
if you can't make your own stink, store-bought is fine.
Yeah, you're running that campaign and it's been a couple days of straight playing over a weekend, and yeah, you might want to get some adventure sense going. Also, Oddfish Games also has what they call How to RPG with Your Cat. This was something that was on Kickstarter and it's finally come to fruition. And from what I hear, it is hilarious. So if you're interested, yeah, check that out. They also have the Shine system. So if you want to write better than Frank, check out the Shine system. Right now, it's like a generalized writing system, but I think they're going to have it more tailored for an RPG system. I think that's in the works, and that'll be coming out soon. Also, Pirate Dog Dice. Yeah, Carrie's making some great dice, and she's slammed. So, but she'll get it done for you eventually. So yeah. Check out Pirate Dog Dice. We have the links floating around on the screen, so go ahead and jot them down. And so if you want custom dice that hopefully roll better than the people on Kyle's show, then yeah, you definitely want to check out Pirate Dog Dice. So, but anyway, thanks for coming to our YouTube channel. If this is your first time, great, you found us. Anyway, please like, follow, and subscribe. And if you want to get alerted or catch us as soon as we go live, or just whenever we post new content, make sure that you attune to that notification bell or button. So anyway, I stole that from Nerdarchy, guys. So sorry, Ted and Dave. I got it.
It's a good one. I like that.
Also, buy our stuff. We've got swag. Yeah, we have a link floating around. It's tinyurl.com/RPG swags. We have t-shirts, we've got phone cases, duvet covers, as Frank says, shower curtains, I know for a fact. And the thing that I want the most is the damn skateboard. You're talking to a guy who broke his ribs roller skating, still wants the skateboard, because I can put it on my wall and it'll look cool. Anyway, so they'll even make that, trucks, everything. But there's a variety of t-shirts. God, we've got so many t-shirt designs. So feel free, you're a fan, check it out. So buy our stuff. Anyway, like I said, tonight's topic is historical and political figures. So let's get the ball rolling. So what we're going to do is kind of a round robin kind of thing. And yeah, let's see. Let's start with Jason. So sure. Tonight, what do you have for us as for your historical or political figure, and what region and zone are you in?
So right to the west of Croaky is the region known as Meridionale, and the people there are known as the Ranidae. And the Ranidae, if you watch the previous episode, you know that it's a group of survivors who made their way after the 0-year cataclysms, traveled the breadth of the continent as survivors, gathered together and landed in the intense jungle and harsh swamps of the Meridionale region. Now, what makes this area so unique, as mentioned before, is the fact that most of the families that live in this area actually live on boats or barges that travel in and around the coastline and through the swampy area. So they're not actually living on land. They tried to settle the land, and all their settlements were destroyed by creatures in the night.
Did it sink into the swamp?
Did they what?
Did it sink into the swamp?
They did not sink into the swamp. They were
Did it fall over, burn down, and then sink into the swamp?
Pretty close. Big bar. There was a big restaurant that they had that was really nice. It was right off the coast, and it did capsize and sink.
Sounds like New Orleans, man.
So, but the reason why I start with that and that background history is to give you an idea that each year they gathered, the families, the captains of the families, the head of the families gather together, and they appoint a speaker because they're not big on outsiders. They have one permanent settlement and is mainly habited by outsiders, except for a handful of select folks that are forced to live in the settlement to govern the country and interact with outsiders. And the person that's currently in charge of that, and has been for many years at this point, is a halfling, a wizened, aged halfling known as Minnie Harshness. So Minnie has been reelected the speaker several times, speaker for the people, speaker of the Ranidae for several times. Minnie is not a grandmotherly figure, however. She is tough as nails and just meaner than a snake, which is why they keep reappointing her to be in charge of this role. No one wants this role. Minnie doesn't want this role. She professes she doesn't want this role, but she accepts it as the will of the families and takes it on a regular basis. Now, Minnie has been alluded to that Minnie has two other sisters. So Minnie has a sister named Dawn and a sister named Twyla Harshness as well. And no one's ever met them, but Minnie has dropped that before in her many, many years as speaker, has dropped that she has these two sisters that live somewhere else in the world, but that she periodically communicates with them. Now, Minnie has some would say an unnatural connection to the swamp in the area. She has been known to go out and commune with the swamp. They also know that many of Minnie's opponents and outspoken opponents have disappeared into the swamp on occasion as well. Now, there are some, behind the hand rumors that Minnie helped them find their way into a swamp. But there's never been any evidence or proof. And those that would suggest that Minnie is culpable for the disappearance of these folks are quick to make sure Minnie never hears that they think that Minnie was responsible for it. So as the speaker for the people, she doesn't have a lot of power or authority over the families, but she wields tremendous power in the one settlement of Meridionale and the interactions that those who come down to Meridionale to really venture forth into the jungle for exotic goods, whatever they may be, for hunting, etc. She controls that trade very well and has managed the whole process with, like I said, an iron fist. Now, it was rumored that at one time in her youth, Minnie did have a lover named Scarcity Jones. No one knows what happened to Scarcity Jones, but Minnie now carries a staff called Scarcity. And so
wow, okay.
No one's sure what happened to Scarcity Jones. So wow. Minnie's not someone to be trifled with, even though she's a halfling. And there's a secret that I don't want to share just yet. I'll save it for my second person, and then there'll be the big reveal for the secret of Minnie Harshness.
Wow. Okay.
So that's what I have to start us off.
It seems like Minnie Harshness is like this version of the Black Staff or whatever like that. It just absorbs the soul of the last person to wield it. So she's doing that for her ex-lovers or something like that. Oh my God. And so what's like a physical description of Minnie? I mean, we know she's a halfling. We know she's of elder years, but are we talking of like noticeably like advanced elder like years?
Yeah, she's noticeably advanced. She is incredibly spry and very lean. So you would think, given how wizened she looks, how aged she looks with the wrinkles in her face and her big knobby knuckles that appear arthritic, she's remarkably spry.
I'm thinking of Granny Clampett when I hear that.
It's not far off. She is a halfling, but she does not have the traditional halfling, warm sensibilities to her.
Right.
She's all sharp angles.
Wow. That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, Spencer, what you got for us, man? What's your region? You usually have something around the Dragon's Claw Mountains. So.
Yeah, so my two regions are the Dragon's Claw Mountains, which is Kaizon, and then the region just to the east, which is the Golden Sea. We're going to be talking about Kaizon today to start with. So you can stay right there. Yeah. So to talk about a historical or political figure, if I'm talking about Kaizon, I have to talk about the man himself. Kaizon the Great, Kaizon the Liberator, or those who whisper Kaizon the Prophet when they are thinking they aren't being heard by the shamans nearby because it is somewhat heretical. So 200 so years ago, when Kaizon was controlled by the former empire of the Scorned Island, just off to the west, that island was a horrific empire controlling and enslaving all of the goblinoids of the Dragonclaw Mountains. No one has good record of who Kaizon was before his rebellion, before he started it, because people didn't care. They didn't write records or keep notes of all the different enslaved peoples who toiled in the mines or died fighting in the pits. What we do know is from his own writings, that Kaizon, and from the writings of people after him, and they said that Kaizon worked in the mines as a hobgoblin, slaving, tolling day in, day out, fed up with his lot of his people's life, being controlled by the empire of the Scorned Isle. One day, however, when he was working down in the Dragon's Claw Mountains, he heard a whisper. And he started listening to this thing, telling him that one day the mountain would explode. The empire would crumble. And he only had to be there to pick up from the ashes. Now, being a sensible hobgoblin, he decided to go and talk to his local shaman. His shaman agreed that what he was hearing was true, that there was something going to happen. So that's why some people still call him today Kaizon the Prophet, but only in whispers. Now, Kaizon began his rebellion, pulling people together, exclaiming that the empire would fall, the taskmasters would have to go back home, their empire would crumble in fire and flame, and they only had to be there to help it come along. He worked with his closest friends, his 6 closest friends, in order to try and take down the empire as they could. His rebellion spread throughout much of the Dragonclaw Mountains, but they were quickly pushed back until more and more goblinoid corpses were on top of the mountains than their oppressors. Until the day the mountain exploded. In a cataclysm not seen since year 0, the mountain at the end of the peninsula exploded, breaking away and creating the Scorned Island that it is today, leaving the empire in ruins and allowing Kaizon to build up the people that he has today. Now, Kaizon set forth what his government would be, creating the 5 positions, the 5 high generals of Kaizon. Those are, one moment, let me find those real quick. His closest friends took on the High Council of High General, High Admiral, Spy Master, High Quartermaster, and High Foreman, as they would build the empire and build their kingdom anew. But then he mysteriously disappeared into Mount Kairos and never returned.
Well, that's pretty, that is, wow.
Hey, Spencer.
Yes.
So what year did he disappear?
Yeah.
He would have disappeared actually very shortly after, only about 2 or 3 years afterwards. I'm trying to find our timeline because it happened. I've got the timeline somewhere. Got it in my drive. One moment.
Well, my follow-up question to that is, are there ever sightings of him like Elvis? So like,
No. There are no sightings of him. There are no sightings of him. No,
like eating flapjacks in a tavern somewhere, and they see somebody that looks like
the truth is actually much worse than the legend. There are many stories that are told of Kaizon and his followers and his closest friends that are used to encourage the young goblinoids, hobgoblins, goblins, and bugbears to be honest and brave and loyal, and all their stories throughout the rebellion. Classic things you would tell kids, basically. But the reality is he had to sacrifice himself to the thing that was whispering to him. The thing that whispered to him is living inside the bowels of Mount Kairos. It was once an eldritch being that was supportive of the horrible empire, their oppressors, until it turned against them because they were refusing their sacrifices. They weren't living up to their end of the bargain. And Kaizon made that deal instead, and his first sacrifice had to be himself.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, are there any factions or whatever that revile or revere Kaizon? It sounds like most of the goblinoids revere Kaizon, but are there those that revile him that are not into?
There aren't many that hate him. But the reason people calling him a prophet is considered heretical is the shamans of Kaizon who revere the ancient mountains and revere the physical place of Kaizon. They see as revering a person as kind of just it is unnatural. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. You don't worship a person, you worship the world itself. They are the seers. People can be protectors. Living things can protect the mountains and look after sacred spaces or be connected to them in some way. But you don't worship a person like you would worship the mountain. So they don't understand. So that's why it's seen as heretical. No, the seers. So yeah, the seers kind of actively kind of work against that. Whereas the quartermasters, they tend to spread the word more reverently.
Oh, okay.
So in that is Kaizon then seen as the like a George Washington-esque figure, a founder of the country kind of
bingo
thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah, Kaizon is considered the founding father of Kaizon itself. That's why it's named after him.
Nice.
That's why the whole truth telling and sort of that model hero to model yourself after,
bingo
but not a religious figure.
But some people are turning it into one, which is why the seers are kind of thinking, no, we gotta pull back against this.
Okay.
We need to make sure the people understand the reality of the situation without letting them know the full truth. Because if they ever know the real truth of what is actually down there, something will go horribly wrong.
Oh yeah.
So the seers know that though.
Some of them, not all of them.
Okay.
Only the tippy top.
Yeah. It definitely sounds like chaos would ensue if they found out there was an elder god living in the mountain,
But how do they maintain and appease it if it's not widely known and widely venerated?
They sacrifice to it.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The seers continue their sacrifices of all sorts of things and or people, but they try not to let it get out.
Gotcha.
So the high rate of disappearance.
I was going to say that. That's what it sounds like.
Way stations and taverns.
Visitors aren't not allowed to come to Kaizon. Just not many make it out.
Yeah, I imagine
there are many cliffs that you can fall off of. There are many caves that cause horrific accidents that you can get lost in from the volcanoes. Stuff happens, guys. I'm sorry.
I imagine dissidents or whatever disappear too.
Yeah, heretics. No, I don't got to worry about them too much.
Yeah, didn't think so.
Just thinking the promotional poster for traveling and visiting
The
Kaizon.
Kaizon, yeah, exactly. The Wanderer's Guide. Don't wander too far.
Too far. Bribe your guide well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh man. So Ian, what you got for us?
Well,
What
do
you
we
got
want
for
to start with Q or S? Or I guess the Scorned Island, or do we want to move south to the jungles?
That is dealer's choice, my friend. That's you. So whichever one you feel the most strong about.
Well, how about you're going back and forth. I'll go ahead and do the Scorned Isle. So,
Okay, we'll do Scornell first. Yeah.
all right, kind of falling on the tales of what Spencer was going on to. Part of the history of this landmass was a civilization that was venerating this elder thing that fell from the skies during that early age of strife and cataclysm, and the elder thing gave all the technology and mystic lore that was needed to raise a strong empire. But as Spencer was saying, over time it became decadent and very foolhardy, as they thought themselves not needing to appease this thing, and perhaps they could raise their own god or make something of their own image. This heresy is what triggered the eventual downfall and explosion of the volcanic area which this chthonic deity slept. So this island has been absolutely devastated by that cataclysm. The explosion wiped out about almost every living creature on the island, so there's actually a poverty of any type of fauna there, just flora. The only thing that's really been there have been these ash walkers, which are zombies that have their bodies were reanimated by just the sheer amount of spite and hatred that infused the land. So they're just these ash husks that come out at night and will either drag people into the acidic heath bogs and have a terrible fate, or will take them back to where the crater is where this giant volcano was. So over time, this island has been completely untouched for a very long time by anyone else because of the rumors, the myths, and just the sheer amount of devastation that racked the Isle. As far as figures that actually have a role currently in what's happening to the Isle are three different figures. One which would be in the forest that's to the west there, that a few survivors from that civilization, from that great empire, they hid themselves far away from the series, from the cataclysm, and live a life of constant repentance for their forefathers' sins. And they have a druidic grove in which that they are constantly working to rehabilitate the acidic ash that has completely destroyed the ecosystem, and trying to find a way to rehabilitate the ashwalkers, which were their former kin, by working with plant magic and infusing them with plants that slowly start to start to kind of swallow the anger that's animating them and put them at ease. So eventually, over time, if one of these ashwalkers has been completely salvaged or saved by the plants, they kind of turn into like a very docile, almost like shambling mound, or just a mass of plant matter that guess it kind of absolves them of their sins. So the major figure for that is Yazegos, which is the prime, or I guess the head of the druidic circle of reconciliation. And so progressively you see that forest there is proof of their success in trying to salvage the island, undo the damage of the ash, and is slowly going to engulf the island from west to east. So no one really knows that they actually exist, because they understand the weight of their sin. They don't want to have attention to them, and they don't want anyone really on this island before they're able to completely undo the damage that their forefathers wrought. So there is a port that has constantly tried to come about by people wanting to colonize the island or plunder it for resources, and that's always been left unfinished, because any time that anyone starts to get an actual foothold and starting to build a community, the druids start to persuade people out by sending strange creatures toward them in the night, or directly attacking or antagonizing them with plant creatures to hopefully dissuade them from actually colonizing further. So without eating up too much time, I kind of have a pirate, probably a former pirate, perhaps someone of the Sea Haven that wanted to give up the life of piracy and then try to actually rebuild this unfinished port, which has plenty of names from it being abandoned and going through many cycles of people trying to get a foothold here. So that's Jola Pothros. So trying to make a place for exiles or other people needing a new life, and not fully aware of all of the terrible things that are happening on this island, but are doing her best to shore up this area and defend it against what she thinks are just aberrant things. Meanwhile, the other major faction leader would be where the cataclysm had occurred is this giant volcanic, just giant empty craters, kind of in between the two areas. It's sunken exactly. Prior to that area being somewhat flooded, there was a great temple that actually had several lower levels. So it, at the most bottom levels, was level with the den for what this chthonic god and where it lived. And so it had a series of tunnels and other types of buildings deep in the earth, some of which didn't completely get destroyed by the volcanic destruction. And it was there that the chief astrologer of the temple that was there had sealed himself away in a phylactery because he saw the coming devastation. And so people that had snuck onto the island were exploring the ruins happened across that phylactery and became possessed by his hateful essence. So there's a small cabal of semi-intelligent whites, of things kind of like ashwalkers that have from very powerful wizards that somewhat retain some of their bodily, their magics to keep them together. And it is kind of a very small threat now, but will grow later as they seek to possess anyone or enslave people that are exploring the areas that they shouldn't, to further his plans. That's a little bit of a nutshell of 3 figures.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about the pirate. Then you use the pronoun, so it's she. That is
yes,
correct. Okay,
that's correct. So I'm imagining, because there's a lot of history with some of the nations about piracy and slave trade. So imagine there was someone that was perhaps a slave trader at one point that came to understand the horrible nature of their crimes and abandoned that life, probably perhaps maybe free a ship of slaves, earning the enmity of all the other evil pirates, but then already having been damned in the eyes of the Sea Haven. Would this be a exile from about any type of port possible? Okay. So no other place really to go than the abandoned port that's haunted by weird ash zombies.
Okay. My question is that what races are we talking about for these figures? Are we talking humanic races, or like Elven or something like that? Or
I kind of pictured it that there would be some type of race that is no longer a playable race, something probably like a cross between a human and an elf, something that had a longer lifespan and perpetually kept either alive by their magics and such. Yeah. So, but as far as like the pirates, humanoids and such, but
yeah. Okay. I imagine something kind of like if you've looked into Everborn and D&D and stuff like that, the Kalishtar. They have a deep connection. They're in older editions, their lives were prolonged like that, and they fell somewhere between elf and human without being half elf or something like that.
That's great. I should really look up that as a source of inspiration. I still have my copy of Everon on the shelf.
There are people who have a psychic connection, if I remember correctly, to like things in the Everborn version of the astral plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like they have like a parasitic / symbiotic relationship with another being like that.
Hmm.
And so that could be an interesting thing, because they could be originally clashed or something like that, but they were making that deal with the elder thing.
Yeah,
It was severed.
that's a really great idea.
Yeah, that's the reason why I brought it up, because just how you described it, it's just like, something like that could work. So threw that out there for you. So awesome. Well, we're gonna circle back around. Jason, you got another zone and figure for us?
Sure. It would be to the west there, Kovat Arat. Yep, that's good where you're at, because I'll talk about both of those two countries. They're linked in their history. So I've mentioned before that Ilisdal and Kovat Arat are both nominally governed by the same entity known as the Everborn King. Really, it's a millennia-old lich who takes very little interest in the governing of the kingdom, but nominally everything is done in the lich's name. So a little bit of background on the lich to sort of set the stage for the personality. Now, since the lich has been around since the cataclysm of the common area, the common people are not sure that it's been the same person the whole time, but I can tell you, if you look behind the cover, it is the same person on the throne as was during 0 year all this time. Now, the settlement of Ilisdal and Kovat Arat, I won't go back through all of that, but there was a seminal moment that really defined the Lich King and changed their personality moving forward. So in the first century after the Common Era, when the people moved into the Ilias Plain, it was sparsely settled. They were able to build fairly quickly. They settled it. They started their new empire, a new home there. They immediately began to try to take over the region of Kovat Arat, which had more sparsely populated family groups. They were spread throughout the mountains and the woodlands and the marsh. And so they found a much greater resistance to being absorbed into the forming empire. And so the guerrilla war really drug on for year after year, decade after decade on that side, with very little success on the part of the Ilindal forces. And what happened was the Lich King eventually was being pressured by his own nobles to sue for peace. The Druids that really were governing the area of Kovat Arat, they were the power structure in that area, were gaining ground. And they were actually, at that time, they were in the woods that are to the west of the Tower of Grief. And at that time, the Tower of Grief was not there. There was a settlement there where the Lich King and his forces had managed to take control of. The Lich King, rather than follow the advice of his supporters who were there, he was already a very powerful magician, sorcerer. He actually, at a feast celebrating the decision to sue for peace with the Druids of Kovat Arat, actually poisoned everyone, used their death to power his greatest sorcery, and much as with the Ians, poisoned the entire woods of Kram Dushtoya, the woods that are there, and turned them into a nightmarish woods. Now, unfortunately, upon hearing of his treachery, at that time, the individual he loved heard of it, was so overcome with grief and shame at hearing what had happened, committed suicide, which then drove the Everborn King crazy himself with grief. And so he built the Tower of Grief and secluded himself then in the Tower of Grief after defeating the enemies that were in the wood line. The Druids and those guerrilla forces were summarily transformed or killed. There was no one to stand in his way. And then the empire of Ilisdal truly began at that time. Now, since that time, he has withdrawn from active participation in the ruling of the empire, but he is still very active in the world. But what he's trying to accomplish or what he's seeking to do is really beyond the ken of anyone that's around him. He rarely interferes in the workings of the empire. And when he does, it seems really to be almost an unnatural intrusion to what's going on. It doesn't seem to have rhyme or reason, but in reality, it does. The Everborn king, who has lived for centuries at this point, is maneuvering on a time frame that the average mortal would never comprehend. To give some sense of the kind of person he became following the tragedy about 200 CE, with the murder of all of his supporters and the subsequent suicide of his lover, he has formed two additional power bases that report only to him. One is known as the Vedma in Kaso, which is a coven of witches, and one is I lost where it is, but the other are known as the Friendly Eyes, essentially a group of spies. Now, his group of spies that he created are monstrous in their own right, because they are, here's the name, Ujasni, Ochi, and Kaso, which are swarm were creatures that are, you can picture bat swarms, spider swarms, insect swarms. Mm-hmm. They're were creatures that turn into swarm creatures that are basically nuisance pest animals. And they act as spies on his behalf throughout his empire and the greater world. His other, the Vedma and Kaso, is a coven of witches that support his activities. And among those witches, there is one small coven that is particularly feared and well known, though no one really knows who they are. They just hear whispers of them, and that is the 3 Hours. Apparently 3 sisters known as Midnight, Dawn, and Twilight. When talking about the first person we talked about, Minnie Harshness is actually Midnight Harshness, one of the 3 coven, and an agent of the Everborn king, who he inserted as a sleeper agent a century ago with the Rana Day to begin building power, searching for whatever only he knows in the jungle areas of Meridnali. The 2 sisters, Dawn Harshness and Twyla, or Twilight Harshness, are abroad in other places. All 3 of them, as witches, know the invocation for many faces, and so they change their faces to appear as they need to for whatever mission they've been given by the quite possibly insane Everborn king.
Wow.
So, that's the Everborn king. So that's the other one. And still, like I said, active and a terror in its own right, but a firm fixture in the entire political structure, the nominal head of the religion of Ilias Dal, the empire of Ilias Dal, the nominal head of the political apparatus of Ilias Dal. That's the Everborn king. So that's number 2.
Okay. When you were talking about it, and you were talking about, the 3 Hours, the witches, and Minnie and Twyla and Dawn, I was just like, no, not Minnie.
Yeah, she's totally evil. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is good twist.
What is she after? What is she after in the swap? And is she likely to hire some people to go find it?
She will never do something overtly that would give up either what the Everborn is seeking directly or compromise her position among the Ranaday. But she would certainly use pawns to go after something under the guise of something else. So it's sort of nebulous, but remember there's something wiped out the Ranaday every time they tried to build a settlement in the jungle. So it's been surmised that probably the Everborn is interested in what that is. And there is definitely some old stone elements that speak to the 0-year cataclysm within the jungle, perhaps speaking to an elder god somewhere in there. And there is a creature, actually, I have it. Hold on. I actually named it. That is, could also be the thing that the Everborn is seeking in there, or to capture one of them alive. What did I call it? I actually wrote stats for it for 5e too.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. This is what happens when you start trying to dig your notes out while you're reading.
That, trust me, I understand. So, oh man,
I'll find it
okay.
eventually after the show's over.
All right, I'll circle back to you then.
Have you
All right.
have you read Drachenfels, or familiar with Warhammer and Constant Drachenfels?
I have not.
I was
I've
going
not
to say,
read that.
just some of your intrigue and the long running plans, and then the poison kind of reminds me of that. If you're looking for something of interesting inspiration for that, but basically just a necromancer that has survived the ages and then resurfaces in terrible ways and has long scheming
Nice.
plots. But there's a famous thing. There's a famous event called the Poison Feast, where after losing in a war and having to make a reconciliation to the Empire, paying restitution and abasing himself on the tombs of his victims, he seemed like he was a rehabilitated member of society. So he invited all of the upper, leadership of the kingdom and their kids to his castle, where he fed them dinner, and it was of course poisoned, and it paralyzed everyone. So then he just butchered their kids in front of them as they were paralyzed and let them starve to death at a table full of food. And that's one part of this saga. And even he just disappeared for a long time and possessed someone in that bloodline of the kingdom, and then try to do the same thing, like a massive coup. So just kind of thinking about
that is crazy.
I've not read that, and now based on your description, I don't want to read that.
Oh, that was alluded to. That didn't happen in the book, but part of the famous of why this one necromancer is so evil. But
wow.
Oh, and I found the name of the creature. It's Umbracilius.
Okay. Umbracilius. Nice.
Yeah. So it's just known as it's a fast shadow. That's all they know. But by the time you see the shadow, it's too late. You're probably about to be a meal.
Got it. So Spencer, what else you got for us? You got us another region, or?
Yeah. So if you go down to the Golden Sea, we'll do a current political leader from the Golden Sea. There you go. So the Golden Sea, which is best known for its roving reefs. We talked about Restholm, the city of guilds, the city of unions of those people last time in their favorite sport. But now we're going to talk about the leader of the largest family of moa herders with their flock of moas. So moas, you may know, are flightless birds. They are large flightless birds, bigger than ostriches. They are basically how you get around in the Golden Sea upon this huge expanse of grassland. And following the roving, rolling balls of water that travel from the Lake Union all across to that stretch of land right there, that stretch of water that nearly connects to Wyvern Pass. And so these roving balls of water, which on the inside are pieces of coral that are magically controlling the water going from east to west and west to east, back and forth, bringing the only source of water to this otherwise parched desert land. Now, the leader of one of the largest families is Iacopo Suega. The Sea of Iacopo, you would think they have wonderful long hair with long braids, cascading with shells and coral beads. And then they turn and you would see burn scars across their face and scalp. Now, Iacopo was given these burn scars by a brush fire when they were very young. They lost half of their flock, of their very first flock of moa, and now vow to never leave a member of the family behind. The rest of their body is covered in intricate spiral tattoos made from the inks of octopi and squids from all the rolling reefs. This is a sign of leadership and strength amongst the families that travel across the grass sea, following the flock of moa and following the rolling reefs. Iacopo takes the flock from the sea to sea on a nearly endless journey following these roving reefs. They know almost everything there is to know about the moa and the reefs, having lived with them all their life. many scholars and historians have tried to talk with Iacopo and learn and write down about this phenomena because it's not seen anywhere else in the world of Socium, but they never leave because the family is too ingratiating. They never want to leave the family of Moa traders because they can't imagine going back to their lives beforehand after they've become one with this group of traveling herdsmen.
Wow. I'm imagining the Moa kind of something like a chocobo or something like
Yes.
that.
Yeah. Chocobo were my inspiration for that one.
Nice. Okay. So the Iacopo, am I pronouncing
Iacopo,
it?
yep.
Iacopo. Okay. Is that one person or is
One person?
One person. Yep. Okay.
Yep. One person. They have a burned half of their head with horrible burn scars. And then the other half is these long braids with coral shells and beads.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, they are. I'm calling them. I'm going to make them canonically non-binary. So
okay, that was my question. I noticed the pronoun they, and it's just like, okay, I wasn't quite sure. We're talking a male figure or a female figure or something like that. Neither. That is awesome. That is awesome. So,
what type of alignment would this person have?
Yeah, that is a good question.
They're going to be neutral good because they like one of my favorite actors refuses to let the family leave. But that means once you're part of the family, you're staying part of the family. They will protect you once you are with the family, but like they can't let you go otherwise.
Does this mean that this person has an olive garden?
There is no garden. They follow the reefs, whichever reefs they happen to follow by that can support their flock.
Yeah.
But when you're here, your family.
When you're here,
your family. Yeah, that's it.
You don't want to. You don't necessarily want to become part of the family because then you won't be allowed to leave.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
What out of curiosity, what's the ritual like for joining the family?
Oh, I haven't thought of that. There should
That's
definitely
a good question.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to come up with a ritual. We're gonna have to think of one.
Well, because I'm curious if it's something like large and ornate because it's a big thing, or if it's one of the things where if you like the Fae,
you accidentally do it.
Yeah, you could accidentally just be part of the family, and so like travelers have to be careful not to say certain words or phrases that might
or pick up
that
certain
clause.
things. Yeah,
I'm gonna guess it's closer to a ritual that is prescribed, that like you have to be there for a while to become part of the family. Like it's not an accident that you jump into it, but it's going to be something probably involving the reefs and involving some of the Moa, because this is a culture that has kind of sprung up over the past couple hundred years since the cataclysm. And so these are people from all across Socium, right? And so Iacopo is going to be human, but you just as likely to see elves or half-elves or halflings or dwarves even. There are even some goblinoids that are part of these bands of herders. So
okay, that's cool.
Yeah, it's going to be something that you gotta intentionally join and express your desire. It's just that everyone who's come to study Iacopo doesn't leave.
I in my mind, when you're saying the ceremony piece, it was coming to my mind the big Roma wedding thing that they do the TV show about. That was coming to my mind, like really over the top, sort of.
Probably not that big, but maybe closer to like taking communion. Like it's a decision. You got to decide you're going to do it.
Yeah, that's funny. So Ian, what you got for us?
So we'll go down to the croaky. So kind of as a reminder, croaky is mostly a frog-based civilization that has an antagonistic opposition to a cult that is festering near one of the river deltas. So these frogs, there are different there's little colonies for each one of them, and actually one of the terms for a group of frogs is a course. So the whole civilization is very much immersed in song. So since we're kind of getting close to time, we'll just kind of do a very high level overview. But there are currently 5 active colonies, as the 6th one was destroyed by an incursion of these worm cultists that are on the west side of Croaky in the lower marshlands. The language itself is something that's almost, it's something that other humanoids are incapable of really replicating their speech, as they don't have the physical glands that make the frog core sounds. So names are a little bit hard to give as a literal approximation because A, they don't have a written language in the same way that we do, and then B, that it is they just can't, it's not pronounceable by tongues. The translations are usually very poetic of names, usually in appellation, such as rain on slick stones, breath of the mountain, trees shake in the wind, dark waters rippling, or break against storms. So I imagine the language itself is very much like Hawaiian in a way, but very fast-paced and very short bits of morphemes strung together that with an emphasis on glottal sounds. So each one of these leaders of these choruses or colonies has their own kind of disposition that kind of, and together when they work in chorus, they are quite harmonious, but each one kind of has its own temperament and how that they run their colony and what their values are. Opposed to them is the menagerie of worm cultists that their place in the west is called the House of Hunger, and where their chthonic worm deity slumbers and is constantly generating and spawning off various megapedes and other invasive insectoid things that are progressively forming a quite literal source of entropy in this lush, hot tropical rainforest. So I have leader names for that as well, and with their cast that they have a very strong emphasis on like very lawful evil cult. So you have the Harzani Wormspeak, which is the voice or the head of the House of Hunger. Dreda Thousand Legs, which is the voice of the Mother's Maw. And then Gruduk Dripping Jaws, commander of Worm and Men. So part of the appellation of names is that you take on an honorary that has a connection to aspects of this dark worm mother. Quite literally, almost in essence, a giant millipede that is, or I guess technically centipede because they're more carnivorous, wrapped up in deep in the earth, so kind of in its little spiral, and is kept perpetually asleep through sacrifice, lest she wake and cause a at least localized cataclysm. But, well, we're so close to time. I guess the super high level questions or things that can expand on, so I use time well.
Oh, I have one, Ian.
Okay.
So yeah. I have to ask, are the worm friends that live to the west, are they of the same race as the rest of Croaky, or are they a different race?
So they're a different race. They're actually a hodgepodge of humanoids. So the Dark Mother, as it were, which is kind of like, in essence, a twin to the progenitor of the Croaky race, that they're both these deities or these things that came through during the year zero. It perpetually is exuding terrible dreams as it's in its own dreamlike slumber, and if you don't have a constant source of song or sound to drown out the constant psychic urge of the giant worm, then you become susceptible to it. So humanoids that aren't inherently frog-like between these two rivers will quickly fall sway to the psychic urges and then lovingly join this cult, where they will either be a willing sacrifice or raving cultists that dwells in the House of Hunger.
A lot of goblins from the Dragonclaw Mountains mines ends up as part of the cult.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what's so funny about that? So the Ranaday, who all disappeared on the continent to the west of Croaky. I'm just wondering if there's a bridge there for what happened to all the population. were they eaten, or did they become cultists and just disappeared? So it's something to explore. We may, before we finalize the project, there may be something to blend even that the Miradnali, which is your western neighbor, tie into that mythos for the missing populations, the Croatoan missing villages on that side. So it's something to explore.
Well, I originally kept the boundary line of that large river to the west because, given that line thickness, if we take it quite literally, that could be up to 7+ miles wide, for example. So I imagined it would be
pretty significant.
It would either keep worm cultists or the giant worm itself from eventually going west, or perhaps the sound of the rushing river itself keeps it subdued and in a dreamlike slumber. So it could be something in the future. Cultists of some kind could try to work to dam that, or try to do something with the river to, I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. It could be something we can collaborate
Yeah,
on.
that'll be interesting. Yeah,
I know, and something you may have thought about on that particular piece, I like where you're going with it, is whether or not that river was always there when the Chthonian worm first appeared, or if the river was someone's effort to contain it.
That's a really good, that's something we should probably explore, because the genesis of the croaky people, I imagine them, if it's literal or figurative, that'll be up for interpretation, but kind of like the, I'm always going to pronounce the name of the toad, the ceremi toad that has the young buried in its back.
Yeah.
It's kind of like blister capsules, that it came from the stars or beyond this world with its brood in its back, landed in the mountainous change right there on the border of where you transition from wet tropical to the mountainous region, and went deep into the earth to where there was a warm reservoir of, thermally heated water where it could raise its brood for the first time. So it could have been that released water from underneath the ground, or perhaps during the early years that was work of croaky to contain.
Wow. Cosmic frog. I love it. That is awesome. That is awesome.
All hail the hypnotoad.
Yeah, exactly.
There's some froggy myths over there.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, could be denizens of that area. So, well, gentlemen, thank you for participating tonight, and showing your, what you've created and all that for your zones. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. So, very looking forward to it. So, all right. Well, yes, we're going to close out tonight's show. Once again, thanks to Oddfish Games for sponsoring us, and also Pirate Dog Dice. And yes, please follow, like, or subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out. We have either close to or at 500 episodes archived and stuff like that, or at least under our belt. So yeah, we've got plenty for you to watch. So, but if you want to get notified when like this show or any other new content goes live or is posted, make sure that you hit that notification bell, and that'll alert you to what we have. So, So without further ado, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Jason, Spencer, Ian. You guys were great tonight, and we'll hope to see you soon on our next iteration of Socium. So again, thanks everybody.